Hi there, and welcome back to Manifest in a Participatory Universe. This week we're going to be going over Chapter 4, and in Chapter 4 we start to get to the root of actually how people are dealing with the world that we're in and why we might be stuck in this. This is the universe and the curse of forgetfulness. Now we've talked a little bit about the forgetfulness of frequencies, where frequency can hold information but not memory. So really, this is where we learn how to begin, okay? And the universe, as we've kind of talked about before, is everything. You know, we've got our universe, which is this smaller everything that we exist within. We know there's got to be something past that because there's not nothing in everything. And when we think of everything, if we're thinking in terms of geometry and planes and lines and points, we're talking about infinity and the frequencies of infinity, and infinity encompasses the idea of everything, the knowledge of everything, the consciousness, the timing of everything. But we, living this life, you know, you probably experience this too. We don't see all of that, right? We experience maybe 3 to 4% of everything around us, of the truth of everything, you know. Physicists say that there's dark matter and dark energy, and we can't tell. It's just mathematically we know it's there because we're limited by what we can perceive. And brilliantly, we've built all sorts of tools and measurement devices to figure some of this stuff out in this heavy-duty mathematics to try and see what's there. And it's just the point that we really don't know. We use tools to measure the frequencies and observe effects and look at stars that 48 million light years across the galaxy, but we don't actually know. We're guessing in a lot of ways using the information that we have from the past, from the science that we've developed in only the last 400 years to tell us what's out there. Now, humans have been on this planet longer than 400 years, but for some reason we only accept what science of the last 400 years tells us. And what that tells us is we operate in a very small portion of everything. And from that portion of everything, we look outwards and we don't see anything else. We understand that everything that we are in this planet is somehow harmonized together. It's in this giant recycling system that we are part of. When we die, we go back into the earth. We get recycled into it over time. You know, you become a tree, you become a flower, you become everything. You get breathed in later on. That is the cycle of life. All the dirt and dust and all of the minerals and things around us, they are fundamental pieces from throughout the universe before we were ever thought of, right? And maybe, you know, everything is empty, and maybe everything is full. There's no glass half empty or half full. Either the universe is empty or the universe is full, and you are here and I am here. Therefore, I think the universe is full. You know, we experience what's going on. This is an experiential universe, which means we don't get to see certain things. Remember, we have perception. But beyond all of that, beyond the limitations of this experience that you and I are having, there seems to be an idea of a great consciousness, the frequency beyond what we are experiencing in the day-to-day life, right? And that's the thing, you know, what if that universal energy outside our capability to observe is so large compared to our fractional senses that the energy itself encompasses the great consciousness, the great energy, you know, the collective unconscious, the collective conscious, the collective knowing. You know, some people might call that God. And, you know, when we look at our lives, we kind of have a piece of that, but it's almost as if we're looking through an aquarium glass where we can see and we can feel somewhat. You know, we can definitely observe the things going on in our lives, but we aren't fully in it unless we, you know, if you stay in the present, if you can focus and add intention to where you are, then perhaps you are more present in it. But beyond you, there are energies and forces and feelings at work that when we hold that in comparison, what we're actually experiencing on a day-to-day basis is limited. And what makes that worse is that, we believe what we perceive. If we come into this life and we have to learn the rules of living and learn the rules of survival, learn the rules of love, learn the rules of, uh, sacrifice, learn the rules of hard work, learn the rules of belief, learn the rules of faith, learn the rules of friendship, learn the rules of behavior. We have to learn all of these things when we come into this world. From the very minute actually before you're born, you are learning rules about moving your hands. Babies move and kick inside the womb. They are testing the rules of their universe as they perceive it. And when they are brought into the greater universe, this world, when they are born, then they learn to believe what they perceive. Now, the trick about that is it's kind of funny. We can only know what we know. So before that baby is born, it only really can speculate on the tiny universe that it perceives. It's only what it can know, right? Maybe you've heard the story about the 3 men and the elephant. 3 men who had never seen an elephant before were all 3 blindfolded. One was put at the trunk, one was put at the leg, one was put at the tail. The first one says, "Ah, I see an elephant. It's like a great snake." The one put at the leg says, "Ah, no, this is no snake. This is like a tree, a massive tree. An elephant is a tree, obviously. Feel how round this thing is. It's, And the third guy, standing at the tail, goes, "You're both wrong. This is like a branch, just a small branch with some leaves, some hairy leaves at the end. This is, that flicks back and forth. I don't understand what you're seeing. This doesn't make any sense." And all 3 men argued with each other, blindfolds on. Is it a snake? Is it a tree? Is it a branch? What is it? But none of them knew because they hadn't ever seen an elephant before. They hadn't ever been told what it was like, what the pieces were. And so they only knew what they knew. They could only make guesses based on the experiences they had. And so they believed what they could perceive. Now, what we're finding with neuroscience, to make things even more complicated, is that we actually perceive what we believe. When there's so much going on in the world around us, and with our phones and our tablets and people emailing us constantly, and all the notifications and apps and whatever shows on Netflix going on, plus you got to feed the kids, you got to feed the cats, you got to take out the dog, you got to make dinner. All of these perceptions of what needs to be done shift what we believe. The more overwhelmed we become, the less we believe we can accomplish. That's not to say we can or can't if we prioritized and changed what we believed, but it affects us. What we perceive, we start to believe. And the stuff that's not important, it kind of gets pushed off to the side, right? Our brains deprioritize anything that's not super relevant to wherever we are in our beliefs. If we are feeding the cat and feeding the dog and feeding the kids and trying to make sure we go to bed and make sure we have the report ready for the boss in the morning, we have to make sure we get some sleep, and the car has to be cleaned for some reason, and the house needs to be vacuumed, and all of these things have to be done, our brains are going to prioritize because they are super efficient. Remember, brains are super efficient at choosing and finding patterns and making those patterns work. Our brains will deprioritize other stuff to prioritize whatever we believe to be most important at that time. And what happens is we miss stuff. How much do we miss? I don't know. It could be a whole lot depending on how narrow your vision is. And the challenge is that we actually, when we start to get in that point, we're acting kind of like teenagers, right? We believe this is true. You should believe this. How many times have you been on the road and you're driving with somebody, and maybe they're driving and you're sitting in the seat, and you are kind of holding on with the handle as they drive, and you're kind of buckling down and tightening the seatbelt and bracing for any kind of impact. Why? Because you aren't driving. You don't have control of the car. You don't have the feel of what's going on, you are actually the driver in this case limits perception of things going on because of the belief that they are in control. In the belief that if they drive the way that they drive, that they are in control, that they cannot do any wrong. But if you're in a passenger in that, you're probably hanging on, right? They're darting in and out of traffic and you're looking around at other people's faces as they pass, and you're kind of holding on as they slam on the brakes real quick. How much do they miss when they're driving? A whole lot. And as a passenger, you aren't paying attention to the same things as them as they're driving. You're paying attention to similar things, but you're also paying attention to all the things that they are missing because they are trying to take charge and do their thing. That is the power of perception and belief. And the truth is that from the minute we get in this world, we're trying to accomplish something. We feel the competition, right? We understand that there is some survival, especially as adults. We understand, we feel it. It scares us. We have to compete, and this is kind of what we've been told. You have to compete. You have to stay alive. Our body understands this on a fundamental level. You have to compete somehow to stay alive. By recognizing patterns with the brain, by becoming more efficient with the brain and the body, it helps. It carries us further. But the problem, that's kind of like that scarcity mindset. Someone is going to take away all the things I have feelings towards. We have to protect ourselves. We have to protect our loved ones. We have to protect our stuff, or else the tigers come to get us, right? I know plenty of people who justify their life through rationalizations of disaster preparedness and being realistic. Oh, I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist. I feel that everybody's in competition. I feel that there's not enough to go around. That's just the truth of things. That is a belief. And the funny thing is that children aren't born with those feelings. They're innocent, they're open, they're loving, they're curious, they're creative, they're playful. They have to learn survival behaviors. But we obviously teach it to all of us. I mean, it's ingrained in our culture, and it's ingrained in some of our beliefs just as soon as we come into this world, because on a fundamental level, we're moving towards that way of being. And the thing is that growing up like that, growing up with survival, growing up with the instinct of staying alive and being efficient and holding on tight for anything that matters, we develop strong physical behaviors of survival because we live one life. One life. What we learn, what we keep, what we grow with in this life drives the need for strong physical behaviors, because that's what will keep us going. If we do not maintain some of those strong physical behaviors, there is a chance that we will not survive. And part of that is that, we understand that when someone dies, when I die, all the things that I have known will be gone unless I put them down. When I die, all the things that I am will be gone. If I leave things behind and people cherish them, and people carry them forward, people read my words, listen to my words, then they are not forgotten. We create our own groups, our own families of people who think and feel and act like us, because we honestly think that the people will help maintain these memories and our learnings and our feelings over time, will help carry them forward. In that way, we might actually stand a chance of living on, legacies. That's what legacies are all about. And we hope that we will learn. We hope that we will not repeat the travesties of the past. We hope that we will actually progress as a species. But as humans, we repeat ourselves again and again and again over timelines. Wars, discrimination, us versus them attitudes, laziness, boredom, distraction. It's not just over the span of centuries that we lose our path. It's within a single lifetime. It's within, 80 years. Every 80 years, approximately according to this time scale, there is a war of some kind. And when it pushes beyond that, the anxiety and the tension within the world ramps up because we haven't learned the lesson again. The next generation has not bothered to learn from the generations before. So we're going to switch topics here just a little bit, because I want to talk about, instead of passing on the information, which is really important, it's important to understand that in this single life, the physical behaviors that we adopt become hardwired for efficiency by our bodies. And, we see this with workouts or weight loss. When you hit that plateau, when the body has become so efficient that it doesn't quite know how to become more efficient by doing the same thing over and over again. And anybody who's hit a plateau of some kind knows when you get there, you need to change something. You need to change the formula a little bit so that your body has something new to adapt to and something new to work with. Now, what people don't realize is that our brains are the same way. The brains are controlling the reactions in the body, right? So if the body hits a plateau, the brains are hitting plateaus as well. And it happens really fast because, again, brains are super efficient pattern recognition, and they are all about efficiency, because the more efficient you are, the more likely you are to stay alive longer. The more likely you are to be safe. The more likely you are to pursue life rather than non-life. So brains are the central point of efficiency. Now, it's kind of hard for someone to think about this, but I want you to really observe this in yourself the next time you go someplace. And I want you to really imagine it in an example I'm going to give shortly. But the hypothesis of diminishing attention is that the first time you experience something, the intention and the attitude that you give it, the attention that you give it as you experience it, I want you to feel that. I want you to really look at the experience, okay? And I want you to remember that and own that, and then maybe a week later try it again. And we'll get back to this, because here's the thing. Our brains move us from anything that could be pain or discomfort or potential death, honestly, but it doesn't even have to be that extreme. It's just slight risk, safety, something like that. And our brain is going to try to move us closer to health, happiness, and, the rainbow over a unicorn sort of thing. And this gets back to that Mandelbrot set from earlier, because that mathematics, the z equals z squared plus c. The way we can read that is, I am here now, I am z, and next, that's the equal sign, next I will be myself and more of myself with conscious intent, or with speed of light movement. It's like intention and the light somehow have an interplay in all of this, because this world, this universe, what we experience of it is based in light. So there's some conscious intent that goes to this. And with this kind of base program running, the basic brain functions, like the limbic brain, tends towards survival, but the least effort expended. And many of our brains have a false belief about that, because if I am blank, and next I will be more blank, plus the intention thereof, we're going to start with I am blank. I am whatever I am. And it short circuits the way that we view the world. If I'm sad, then I'm going to say it, I am sad now, and tomorrow I will be more sad. That's giving intent into what you will be, unconsciously. That's the way that brain functions. Z equals z squared plus c is sort of like this formula for who I want to, or how I want to behave, how I want to view my life. And see, once upon a time, burning the calories for pondering would be just wasted calories, right? Out in the desert, if you're pondering about yourself, it's just wasted calories. Survival mattered first, and life was hard. Hard thinking, or pondering and thinking about all these things, meant less calories for hunting, gathering, and running away. We didn't actually start seeing some of the basic uh, cognitive exploration until different societies reached a point of comfort where people could go away, where mystics could go away or take drugs and sort of search for different levels of what they were actually doing with the world, right? Our basic brain has the false belief that expending more energy means we have less of us to be more of us tomorrow. That's how that formula works. So if Z means we have less energy, then next we will have even less energy, and that's adding intent to even less, right? So the truth is, consciousness, the very idea of consciousness, doesn't adhere to that formula. That's how the brain works, but true consciousness, stepping out of the physicality of the brain into the concept of mind being I am, the piece of me that thinks but is not regulated by the physical brain. The truth is that consciousness doesn't adhere to that formula, but the brain does. We don't live the life of hunters and gatherers anymore. We can afford to wake up as a collective consciousness. We can afford to wake up that mindset inside of ourselves because we don't have to rely on the base formula of I am now and next I will be more of this. We can actually take time to reprogram that. Except it's something you have to teach yourself. If you've never been taught how to learn, it's kind of difficult. Since we're born, the limbic brain searches for feedback to put into action. It uses that formula, I am safe and next I'm going to be more safe. I am in trouble, but the thing is, the brain doesn't think it's ever safe. The brain always thinks it's in trouble. It's always, I am going to be hurt, and next I'm going to be even more hurt. Like, it's always looking for danger. It looks toward the negative first because that is the most efficient way to keep you surviving, to keep you safe, emotionally safe, physically safe, mentally safe, if it looks at the negative first. And the neocortex, instead of being right there with the limbic brain to keep you safe and keep you and learn those rules, it takes years to mature and start creating a sense of reality from the world. And all that time, the limbic brain is searching for, lions, tigers, and bears. Today we know them as apps, notifications, interruptions, distractions, accidents, and constant dread of the past and future. Now, in an untrained brain, we fall prey to the designs of society. That's just what happens. So what do you think a trained brain might experience? So the thing to do, the thing that's part of the training, is to take that idea of the formula, I am blank, and next I will be blank, with the intention towards that, and sort of look at the future state and say, okay, that's where I want to be. Okay? It's easier to repeat something done once. The more we trigger common neural reactions, the more the brain remembers and hardwires those reactions for more efficient firing next time. The brain is that's just kind of how the brain functions. Things that fire together wire together. And it's actually, when people say, hey, come up with something unique, it's really hard to create a completely unique, authentic idea. The chances are that someone somewhere in time likely had the same idea in a similar fashion, because if you can only know what you know, and the brain is wired for efficiency, then your brain is just going to continually cover the same neural pathways that have gotten you where you are. And it's only by breaking that and coming up with something, having a different way to think, that it actually moves outside of that efficiency. And that's what you need to get creative, is move outside that efficiency. All of our imagination is programmed by the sights, the sounds, and experiences of our own lives. Spoken and written communication changed this because we learned to experience realities outside of our own, through our own lens. Like when you read a book, right? You are learning about that reality, learning about that world, learning about those characters and the setting, but you're kind of doing it through the lens of your own mind. So it's still within there, and it actually gets locked in pretty hard. And even with ample evidence, the brain fails to believe things until a core belief is challenged or broken, right? Those efficient connections and neural connections, you really have to work hard to break those. And when we do that, a lot individuals can experience a moment of like serious recalculation, right? When you learn something that goes counter to the beliefs you've had, you have to reinterpret all the past events in light of your new information. Because as we proceed forward in physical space, we can't go back and relive our lives. But when a belief shifts, a deep core belief shifts, it sort of goes back in our brains and adds whole new dimension to everything. It's an experiential universe, and we experience it from our first person perspective with the limited beliefs, with only what we know, what we've brought in, and what we live. So it's really hard to change perspectives, change beliefs. So let's go ahead. Next one here. So it's really hard to change beliefs. It's really hard to change behaviors. It's really hard to change the things that we do. But what we have to realize at this stage of our world, at this stage of our civilization, where we are and everything that we're doing, everything is created by somebody. I'm not talking trees and plants and rocks. What I'm talking about is you live in a house. Everything in your house was built by somebody, which means they designed some piece of it, they thought about some piece of it, how it went together, and the effect it would have on you. Wherever you are in the world, it's the job of millions of people to make sure everything you experience pops, stands out, jumps and grabs our attention. From hotel rooms to your clothes, to cars, jobs. These things are designed to bring you joy, to grab your attention. Because it's limbic triggers just as much as fear, right? A very nice door handle is actually going to release just a little bit of dopamine. I succeeded in opening a door. It's a reward neurotransmitter, right? It makes you feel good. When you are truly fully surprised, the reaction itself is beyond fear and joy, right? Only afterward do we assign names to what we felt. Only afterward that we've absorbed all the information and our heart starts to slow down, do we go, okay, that was really exciting, right? It could also be really fearful. What choice do we make about the labels that we add into things? What does that say about where we're going with it? Because it takes the neocortex a few seconds longer to figure out what the trigger is and what to do about it. How we view that trigger is huge about our perceptions of the world. Because by the time the neocortex figures out, oh, well, that's a surprise party, our bodies are already in like full-on fight or flight. We are maybe screaming and ready to run away. We can feel heart pounding in our throats, and all of a sudden we're like, oh, the legs are ready to bolt. The legs are ready to run. We're ready to hit somebody maybe with a purse or a bag or a backpack or glasses or throwing a fist, Everything about the world that we're in right now is created by somebody to elicit a reaction. And at this point, we can't quite get away from that. And what happens, though, is that it overwhelms our senses. And, in the wild, that kind of reaction saves your life. But when was the last time you truly went native? See, in our world, we become micro-triggered on a minute-by-minute basis. It happens so often, we lose sensitivity. Author Joe Dispenza in his work alludes to that loss of sensitivity, or a lack of perceiving basic universal frequencies and how it can affect our health. He says dopamine and adrenaline are seriously addictive chemicals. Simon Sinek says the same thing. As we lose sensitivity to some of these, we require greater levels of stimuli to drive a similar reaction. In an untrained brain, in a brain that hasn't had the mind kind of examine the beliefs and reset those, the negative cycle of past may appear in consciousness and act as a catalyst through the universal formula, which that starts to look like that downward spiral that people with depression start to describe, right? I am depressed. So next I will be more depressed. That's the state of me plus the conscious intent. And it starts when we look kind of backwards at life. We start comparing life, where we are now against somebody else, or where we are now versus where we've been in the past. And because because the limbic brain is trained to look at the negative first, it's really easy to pick out all of the negative things in life, and that starts the spiral. Literally, the survival technique that is meant to keep us safe is the start of the negative spiral. So, I went for an interview and I didn't get a job. So I am without a job, and next I will be even more without a job. And that's my conscious intent that I put into it. That's that z equals z squared plus c. That's not going to do you any good. That's not going to get you a job. That's not going to even cause action. What that will do will start the spiral, because when the brain starts hearing that on a really subliminal level and really starts feeling it, it starts going down, and we start looking for confirmations of that negativity. We look for confirmations because that's what the neurocortex does, right? It hears the subliminal-based behavioral programming, and then it looks for the perceptions of reality that agree with that. It gives it feedback. That's how we work. We perceive something, and then because of that belief, we look for other things that confirm it. Now, what if it goes the other way? What if we are in a state of I am sad, tomorrow I will be more sad, right? I don't have enough, tomorrow I will be even worse in not having enough. That leads to anxiety. All of a sudden we start worrying about the future. In one case, when we're looking at the past and we're looking at everything that may not have worked, we are looking at confirmations that things might not work. The brain is working on that fundamental z equals z squared plus c formula. It's saying, I am sad, tomorrow I'm going to be more sad. And with anxiety, it's, I don't have control, tomorrow I'm going to have even less control. And the intention there is that you don't know what's coming. Therefore, you are going to panic about it. You're going to worry about it now. You're going to stress yourself out now. Anxiety is this comparison of the future that you cannot control. But because of our evolutionary track of seeing the light come up and the light go away and the sun and the cycles, we actually believe we can predict the future. We believe deeply that because I feel one way now, in the future, next, I will feel even worse, z squared. I will feel even more of that. I will feel it even more deeply. Anxiety is another spiral down because in fact, these are both spiral downs. Depression spiral downs when you're looking at the past and comparing. Anxiety spirals down when you're looking at the future and comparing. Both of these are simple formulas, simple examples of that z equals z squared plus c Mandelbrot set formula that seems to be, like, I'm not saying that the brain thinks in this formula. I'm saying if the brain thinks, when there's conscious intent in the subconscious levels, it's using a base sort of like this. Saying, I am this, therefore next I will be even more of that. And what that kind of leads to is this idea of, increasing dissatisfaction. And so here's what we're going to talk about, the decreasing attention. So have you ever, imagine that you're at a brand new restaurant for the first time, okay? And you are just amazed by everything. It's delicious. The service is great. The food looks beautiful. You're with great company. The music is awesome. And when you walk away, you tell tons of friends about the place, okay? And a few weeks later, you go back, and it's not the same, right? And somewhere in your brain, you think, man, did I not see this last time? I know I didn't change. I left and then came back. This place went to dumps in like a couple of weeks. Did they change ownership? Did I miss something? What's going on? And it's you. Sorry, your brain changed a ton in that week. And mostly your brain is noticing all the same things it did before, but since it's already built the neuroconnective pathways with them, they're now familiar. So those neuroconnections can fire more efficiently now, which means the brain has more time to see all the other information, all the other sensory inputs, all the other things that you missed last time because the brain prioritized certain things. Now, when I'm sitting alone, I think, okay, if I close my eyes and I can't see where I am, right? If I put on gloves, I can't feel the direction and force of the wind on my skin. If I put over, ear speakers, if I put on headphones and I kind of drown out the sirens down the street and the sound of the dryer finishing a batch of laundry, then I cut myself off from my senses. And what do I have? I've got just me inside my head. And my brain from that, an untrained brain, actually, will kind of go everywhere, right? It'll play, it'll start going crazy, it'll start looking through all the different images of the past and the future and imagining things, and it becomes what they call the monkey brain, right? Because it's bored. It wants constant information to figure things out. We are receivers. The brain is a receiver from all the senses that puts the whole ideas back together again. But the mind is the one that's doing the monkey stuff. The mind is the thing that is trying to absorb the information and make judgments on our behalf. And when I'm cut off like that, which sometimes I do, I meditate like that, because in that space, I'm still me, but I have no input from the world around me. I need my senses to tell me what my body is experiencing. And since we only experience a fraction of the real world at any given time, what am I experiencing within myself? So that builds into that restaurant idea, okay? So I want you to say, inside of myself, I am a sensory, I'm receiving all of these senses, but if I close myself off from that, I'm still me. But the brain is going to go kind of active because it's looking for things, right? So when you first went to that restaurant and experienced the experience, the brain chose to perceive what it wanted to perceive based on what I believed I deserved as a first-time customer with my unique thoughts, emotions, and history. The second time at that restaurant was very different. The brain already knew the input. The brain's super efficient. It recognizes patterns. So what did it do? It moved past the prioritized first input set, and it started observing a second level of observation. And sometimes when you go back to a restaurant like that, it kind of gives you a yuck feeling, right? It's not bad enough to get up and walk out, but it's certainly, you definitely see things you didn't see before, and you start to wonder, do I actually like this place? Was this actually worth recommending? That's the funny thing about Yelp and all of these services is people say, well, 80% of people will visit a place based on recommendations, and that includes online recommendations. But online recommendations don't capture the way that brains process that information over time. And repeatedly, we would give the same place a lower and lower score because we observe more of the surroundings and more of everything that has to do with that restaurant, that store, that service. It gets harder and harder over time to impress the same level of uniqueness and service upon somebody. And that's the thing, is that brains are bored. It's efficient. It wants constant stimulus. It wants new information to keep gathering for safety and security and anything we do. If you make a third trip to the restaurant, boy, you're going to see a whole bunch more like personal annoyances, because once the brain looks out and confirms, okay, this is the reality that we're in, this is the restaurant, this is what it is, it starts up that universal formula again, right? Z equals Z squared plus C. So, okay, yep, there's we're in this restaurant. I noticed more information before, so now let's go ahead and look for something. It didn't live up to the first time when I went back a second time, so now we're going back a third time. So, oh, there's a napkin on the floor, right? We're going to find things like that super fast. The minute you walk in the door, you're going to start picking out things that confirm that it doesn't live up to the expectation you set from the first visit. That's the way the brain works. It's looking for any negative piece to confirm the hypothesis when it got bored the second time. And it takes motivation, it takes intent to say, yep, that is okay. That is the way the brain works, and that doesn't mean this place is bad. Because the brain's going to keep searching for anything new to update itself. It's going to keep looking for anything that is interesting, that keeps it occupied. So now we've got a choice. An untrained brain will run a program of negativity. It's more efficient to tend towards negative consciousness, and the brain believes it will more than likely save our lives in some small measure, or at least move us in a safe direction by tending towards that negativity. Our brains may initially believe that thinking in the positive is foolish and idealistic. If we never come back to that restaurant, then we might convince ourselves on a basic level that we save energy, and we might justify it through saving money, right? If we find enough things we don't like, we'll find reasons to go with the belief that it's better that we don't go to that restaurant. Maybe, oh, now we're going to save money. We don't have to walk as far. It's a lie that we tell ourselves. And this detaches us from any actual forward momentum. There is more than enough energy in most of us to get up, move our bodies to a location, and do a thing. We have a choice to train our brains to look at the positive and acknowledge only the positives. That's not saying that the negatives aren't there, but that we need to acknowledge the positives. When we acknowledge the positives, we train the brain into the perception of positive. When we acknowledge only the negatives, only the realistic, quote unquote, negativity of the world, we train our brains that that is the state of the world. And it will reinforce the perception that things are negative in the brain. And it will build a belief that the world is negative. And that belief will even more entrain our brain towards the perception. If we reaffirm the positives with a healthy knowledge of the aspects of negativity that we notice, then our brains reset the formula with a positive consciousness. As long as the negative behavior is not too deeply ingrained, you can learn to appreciate the restaurant for its charm, right? Maybe you actually come back and start to enjoy it because it's not perfect. You start to actually appreciate the dimensionality of it. It's not a two-dimensional concept anymore. It's a three-dimensional concept in your brain with flaws and realities. We tend to take things in archetypes, in high understandings and generalities. This restaurant is great, this restaurant is bad. But life isn't black and white. The last choice we have is actually to recognize the positive and negative and play a game with it. Let's revert our mentality back into a little bit of the childhood game, right? Let's be playful. Let's be curious. What can we appreciate about the positive? How can we challenge ourselves to continue to appreciate the positive and acknowledge the negative and understand that it's not yours to control? You don't have to walk in and try to clean everything about a restaurant or try to bust the tables with somebody because a waitress or a waiter or a busboy or somebody is slow. Is it important in life to make sure everybody knows how bad they are? No. That's not going to do you or them any good. Can we actively ignore it without driving ourselves insane? Yeah, we can. And the more you train yourself, the better perception of positivity you will have. Can we let it go because it has so little bearing in the rest of our lives? I don't know. Can we? People with OCD can't seem to let some of those things go. The brain actively holds on to those connections. Things have to be done a certain way. Maybe we start playing the game of just counting how much time it takes before somebody brings us a menu, or counting, all the people in the restaurant, and, just any little game. Any little game keeps the brain busy and appreciates where we are. Count how many positive things you can say about the place. How many smiles do you see? Because if we decide to accept this restaurant as it is and choose to return on further visits, we can expect the mind to wander. We can expect to constantly see new inputs that kind of frustrate us and turn us aside. So what's the best that we can do at that point? Well, I'll tell you. Bring a book. Bring a book. Because see, brains are so proficient at running the physical and mental programs that we become unaware of space and time around us. If you go back to that restaurant a ton of times, you will completely ignore any of the surroundings. It can degrade around you, but because it becomes so familiar, it doesn't matter. Have you ever driven somewhere, parked, and gotten out of the car only to realize you have no memory of driving? Yeah, you could kind of remember traffic and other cars and even a woman asking for change on a corner, but the actual driving, though, maybe not so much. When much of our life is on this automatic repeat, the mind drifts off. It's bored. It's going to look at other things. It starts looking into the past. It starts looking into the future. It starts wondering and worrying about problems and challenges that are not the ones we're facing. And I hate to say it, much of the time, we are not conscious participants in our world. The brain is active, the body is active, but the mind is somewhere else. We are on autopilot. So I want to talk about a minute about the idea of the frequencies of the infinite you and the frequency of the physical you, and how in this universe it's the physicality, the light hitting us, and the light going through our eyes, versus, and the frequency that makes your body and the brain what it is, versus the mind, the consciousness, the frequency of that, which seems to be something that extends much, much further and possibly into infinity. Because when I hear people talking about a holographic universe, I used to think that actually meant that we are pure simulations. We are data from, a computer. We are the Sims, basically, right? And I think it has less to do with that and more to do with the idea of energy and frequency and all these different levels. And when we look at the frequency of the universe, the frequency of a planet, the frequency of a person, the frequency of a culture, what are the vibrations and the tone and the pulsations? All of these things, as we look down to the bare levels and up to the big levels, when we look at it in this way, each one seems to encompass and build the next one and hold essence of it. And I kind of think that's what some of these people mean by holographic universe, that a portion of it demonstrably shows the same as the larger portion of it. So the idea of the harmonies of attraction, of frequencies of subatomic particles, in some way is representative of the larger universe. And I know that physics is trying to combine these whole ideas of quantum entanglement and the large universe and the small universe and relativity, and we're trying to find a bridged theory that combines all these things in science. But then there's also the other side of that, and this is the mirror theory, that the mind, the consciousness of you, the creativity of you, the curiosity of you is not located in any one place in the brain. In fact, consciousness at all, we can't seem to lock down where it exists. The frequency of you, the you that is the mind, that is the thinking part, that is the consciousness, doesn't exist in one limited location in a brain, anywhere. And in the old brain and the new brain, any of it. Those are perceptions and behaviors for running the physical body. The thing that is you is beyond that. And when you make a decision in the mind and you train the brain into reflecting that decision, what we see is the hologram changes. What we see in the world changes based on the way that the mind chooses to perceive, the way that we train the brain to perceive. The mirror of reality, what we see coming into our eyes, reflects what we choose to perceive, what we choose to direct outward, what we choose to change in our perception of reality, what we choose to believe in our perception of reality inside the mind. Now, I was listening to a speech by a guru online on YouTube the other day, and he said there are three different pieces. We have the brain, the physical brain, which has its own rules that it has built in, its own perceptions and rules that's built in. And I tend to think, okay, well, that's that z plus z squared plus c. Here's the rules. Here's the foundation. Here's the mathematical structure that this brain is using to form ideas, to build connections, and so on. Then he said you have the mind. The mind is the greater consciousness, the greater frequency of you, the things that are and can be. And then beyond that, there's awareness. And awareness is directing the mind into certain portions to think and concept. Different, when you look at a memory and you place it in your brain, when you think about the last wedding that you went to and the dress that the bride was wearing, how did the cake taste? Going out on the floor and dancing, feeling like a fool and doing it anyway, right? That's awareness. That's putting your intention in one spot, from the mind to awareness. And what we notice in some of these things is that awareness can shift behavior, it can shift beliefs by adding awareness in the mind to some of these beliefs. We actually shift them, and what happens is the outside world changes, our perception of it changes because the belief shifts. And that's part of that hologram. When we change inside, it changes outside. Just by observation of it and belief in a certain determination of it, we change the outside world. Now, in quantum physics, this is the idea of the particle versus the wave. Right? In light and electrons and these things, do they function as waves or function as particles? It depends on where we observe. It depends on how we observe. It turns out when we intend one thing and we go to measure that one thing, we get it. So just by intention, just by remembering, just by bringing awareness to it, the hologram changes. So peering into one piece of the universe is like peering into the full vision of the universe, peering into our mind, into our beliefs, closing our eyes and trying to examine who we are and the beliefs that create that, shift the outside world. So, is there a universal formula? I really believe that z plus z squared, or z equals z squared plus c, c being intention, c being the speed of light, I think that is as close to a universal formula as we might get, but we might be perceiving it wrong. We're trying to say I am. It's as the bush spoke to Moses, I am, right? The burning bush, I am. The power of God in a lot of these ancient religions, the power of being, the power of the greatness is I am. And inside of this, the frequency that you are, the frequency of thought, the frequency of mind is I am. I think there's something very interesting there. And the idea that this formula that our brain seems to use at a very basic level, something and then something more plus intention. And intention goes second by second. It goes millisecond by millisecond, hour by hour, minute by minute. It's the intention that happens between one perceived moment of time, which is light hitting our eyes, and the next perceived moment in time. When I hold up my hand, my intention is that my hand is up, and then my hand is more up. My hand is rising, right? That's how I might read that formula. My hand is rising, and it's my hand is in one location, and it equals my hand being in the next location in the next moment of time. I'm interested in raising my hand now. I'm going to be more interested in the next second to raise my hand. So it's hard to stop and examine the formula for common reality because time kind of dictates the physicality of it. But inside our heads, there's more to it. And the thing is, this keeps coming back to the idea of music and time. Time is this thing that has a melody to it. It's a frequency. Everything in our experiences has a frequency. It's a vibration going on. Time is the music of this universe. Notes played in sequence that show the harmony and rhythm of everything. We need to be aware and grateful of the music of time. Without time, we would not be. We would be energy. We would be outside of that. Time allows the experience and the physicality of the bodies. Light allows time. Our perception of light creates the perception of time. And because of time, we can experience this universe, and we can participate with it and move things around and enjoy it and perceive differently and shift beliefs. If we stop and try to examine one moment in time, it's already in the past. We have nothing. Not even us to perceive it, because once we've moved past that, we're still in the present. I believe that the frequency of energy and the consciousness of energy is infinite. If we removed the formula, we still exist. Z equals Z squared plus Z. We still exist without that. That formula helps the physical brain, the physical body, the physical cells, the physical atoms, the physical connections, neurotransmitters, neuroplasticity. It allows all those things to exist. Like closing our eyes and taking a step back to experience the mind and notice how it functions. Right? We have to close off. We have to close our eyes. We have to take a step back to experience the mind, because otherwise we are stuck in the present. We are stuck being who we are. We have to remove ourselves to actually see that we are part of this experience. The mind is functioning with programming, and we actually have to step outside of it to see that programming and shift it, to override it. We are more than this mind and body. We are beyond time and space. We are energy and frequency participating in a temporary physical experience. And boy, this is a roller coaster ride for an eternal being, okay? Eternal energy, this opportunity to come in and experience something as if brand new every single time. That's a roller coaster. And of course, if we're energy, if we're riding this time-based reality and going back and frequently on the verge of resetting a physical experience like a demo, and we have the ability to cajole the energies of the universe to fulfill our desires, because why not? If we are nothing but conscious frequency, and this is just a piece of us coming in here like the aquarium, right? We should be able to actually find some way to jump into the aquarium and play with the fish. And if we could, why wouldn't we? Maybe we forgot. And maybe we just got bogged down by the physical programming of safety. You know? Z equals Z squared plus Z. It keeps us safe. I am safe today. Tomorrow I will be safe. I am cautious today. Tomorrow I will be more cautious. I have love in my heart today. Tomorrow I will have more love in my heart. Until we don't feel love. And then the formula changes because it looks at the negative. What don't we have? And then we start to go down that spiral. Because when we come into this, we're kind of blank. We get rewritten. We lose who we truly are. And it takes decades to get that back again. Worse yet is the ridiculous truths we use to convince ourselves of our lack and limits. The earth is flat, right? I deserve to be ahead of this other person in traffic. You should do this because this is what I think you should do. I am right. It's my experience, so I'm going to tell you what you should do. That's not the person that any of us are. We don't believe these silly truths. Throughout history, peoples and cultures impose rules to define who they are and why they exist here. And it's all a bit of a joke when we look at the bigger picture, right? Because the point is to experience it. Our physical experience includes the rules of a physical structure in a physical universe, in a physical world, with the efficiency of the brain, which is the physical piece. It dampens our ability to experience the best of life. All the joy, excitement, fulfillment. These are things the brain has a hard time creating. It's looking towards the negative. It always wants to find the negative first. You have to train it to reframe that in a better way. We do not know true joy until we've released ourselves from the programs which locked it away. We know excitement, right? As we grow older, we know excitement mostly as fear and anxiety, because we've been taught to believe that fear and anxiety are safer emotions to keep us alive, or at least in survival. Fulfillment? Well, how many of us were told that we have to work hard to be fulfilled? The harder we work, the more fulfilled we will become. We will earn money. We will feel good about ourselves. But fulfillment is a state of mind. No further effort to feel fulfilled will result in that feeling. You got to start feeling it first to feel it. You don't have to keep working harder to feel happier. Once created, once we start telling the brain, this is the feeling I'm going to create, this is how I'm going to start creating, the brain has to be trained to find these things. Neurons that fire together, wire together. If you have not felt this and looked for these and repeated it, then those neural connections are not going to get more efficient. They are going to start fading back. Because if they don't fire together consistently, if the brain doesn't try to optimize it, then eventually it kind of washes out, right? Once trained, though, the brain readily accepts joy, excitement, and fulfillment. Not because the world has changed, but because we've changed how we perceive the world. We recognize the basic formula of the physical world back in the back recesses of the brain, and the fallacy of the universal formula on the mind, right? We know that there is plenty of energy around us to think about who we are, to train the brain into a better way of being, but we operate on base program. We have to choose with intent and conscious focus to reset the mind's fundamental fallacy that there is not enough energy for us to be mindful of our life. We have to control the variable we have at the deepest level of existence: choice. So to summarize kind of this whole concept, this whole class this week, we perceive what we believe, and we believe what we perceive. What are you believing, and what are you perceiving? Whatever you perceive, look at it, examine it, and question it, because when you perceive that, that is defining what you actually believe. And if you choose not to believe that, if you choose to move in a different route, if you choose to supplant that with a different belief, you're going to start perceiving things differently. Because the brain mostly makes decisions to keep us safe and alive. And because bodies and brains are wired for efficiency, they get bored easily. So they're constantly looking for things to keep it occupied, for things to keep it safe, for things, anything that might jump out. And I'm going to say it one more time. There might be a common fractal code at the base of, our chain of life, and certainly the way that the brain thinks. Z equals Z squared plus C. I am this, and next I will be more of this with intention. Whether we recognize that intention or not, as soon as our brain sets something into motion, that's an intention for something to happen. If you go to raise your arm, even if you are unconsciously kind of doing it as a behavior, you have an intention, your brain has an intention at some point to raise that arm. That is the intention part of it. So if we start to look at that formula, maybe we can start learning how to reprogram ourselves. So this week's assignment, I want you to find a piece of music for your vision movie. And the music should be upbeat. It should be powerful to you. It should be, I don't know, I kind of think rhythmic because I am moved by rhythm. There's something very magical about rhythm. A lot of music throughout time has a bass rhythm that sounds like a heartbeat, and it very much is like an embryo or a fetus in the womb. That core heartbeat goes back to a very primitive part of us, and I think that any song that has that sort of thing is good to use for this, because it deeply entrains the limbic system, the subconscious brain, to pay attention, and it resets it back to a very primitive point in our existence and a very primitive point of our training. Now here's the trick about this. This is going to be activating audio neurons for the Vision movie, but it cannot have lyrics. So even if you love the song, even if the words are in a foreign language, even if you know those songs so well that you consciously ignore the words, even if you say it's the karaoke version, it doesn't have words in this version, don't use it. The song you choose cannot have any words. And there's plenty of places, search for free music online. There's plenty of places to get a 1 minute or a 2 minute demo, and those work just fine. Because the thing is, if you hear words, the neocortex starts processing. And what we're trying to do is get past that. We're going to occupy the neocortex with some of the emotions and some of the pictures that you've already selected from the previous chapters. Here, we're going to choose music. And the music has to help bypass all of those senses and get deep, deep into the subconscious brain. So we'll go ahead and review those after you guys have a week to look it up. And if you have any questions, please write them in the comments. I look forward to reading. Thanks. Bye.